Have you ever met someone who changed your life in just a few seconds? Someone you never expected to matter? That's exactly what happened to a powerful billionaire who thought he had everything until a humble cleaning lady walked into his office one stormy night. What followed wasn't just a miracle, it was redemption, love, and a lesson about humanity. Before we go on, allow me to wish you peace and good health. Tell me, from which country and at what time are you watching this story? The rain had been falling for hours, tapping gently against the tall windows of Westbrook Tower. Inside, the city lights flickered on the glass walls, broken and trembling like the man sitting behind them. Graham Westbrook stared at his computer screen, its pale glow bleaching the color from his face. A dozen lines of code scrolled by, and with each one, another file vanished, another piece of his empire gone. He had built everything from nothing: the company, the tower, the reputation that made people lower their voices when he walked into a room. And now, all of it was unraveling. His finance servers had been hacked, his accounts drained, his name already trending online with the word fraud. Somewhere outside, thunder rolled across the skyline. The sound made the empty office feel even larger, lonelier. He loosened his tie and tried another command. The cursor blinked in defiance, and his reflection stared back at him in the glass. A middle-aged man with a suit too sharp for the hour, shoulders sinking under invisible weight. He muttered, "Damn it!" But the word barely reached the corners of the room. At the far end of the hallway, a cleaning cart squeaked softly. He ignored it at first. Then came the faint rustle of a mop being wrung out, followed by a woman's quiet humming. It wasn't a tune he knew, but it sounded calm out of place in a night that was falling apart. The elevator chimed, its echo disappearing into the marble floor. The woman stepped closer, pushing the cart with one hand, holding a bucket in the other. Her hair was pulled back in a neat braid. She wore a navy blue janitor's uniform, sleeves rolled just above her wrists. Graham didn't even look up until she stopped near his desk. "Sir?" she said softly, noticing the red warning symbols flashing on his screen. "That file doesn't look right. Mind if I try something?" He frowned. "Excuse me." His voice was low, defensive, the voice of a man used to control. She hesitated but didn't back away. "The error pattern looks familiar. I used to fix this kind of mess." There was a shy curve to her smile, the kind that came from habit, not confidence. For a moment, Graham wanted to laugh at the absurdity a janitor offering to save what his IT department couldn't. But he had already lost too much to care about pride. "Fine," he muttered. "Be my guest." She moved with quiet precision, fingers steady on the keyboard. He watched the screen as lines of code began to reorder, errors collapsing like dominoes. The whir of the cooling fans filled the silence. In 3 minutes, the screen blinked once, then steadied. One folder had survived. It wasn't much, but it was something. She turned the monitor toward him. "Try opening that," she said. He clicked. A single file appeared. Its name: Second Chance Zip. For the first time that night, Graham blinked as if waking from a long sleep. He opened his mouth to ask how she'd done it, but she was already gathering her tools, locking the mop handle into place. "Wait," he said, standing abruptly. "What did you?" "Nothing special, sir," she replied, voice even. "Just cleaned the mess." She started toward the door, her shoes making soft squeaks against the polished floor. The sound of rain outside mixed with the low hum of the servers, steady and almost comforting. Graham stood frozen, his hands still hovering above the keyboard. It felt strange to be helped, stranger still that the help had come from someone who barely belonged in his world. He glanced at the clock on the wall. It was almost midnight. The entire building slept except for him and the woman who had just saved what was left of his company. "What's your name?" he called out. She paused by the glass doors, looking back over her shoulder. "Elena," she said. "Elena Morales. Do you work for maintenance?" Her lips lifted slightly. "Most nights, yes. Some nights, I fix things that aren't supposed to break." "Oh." Before he could answer, she disappeared down the hallway, pushing her cart, leaving a faint trail of lemon cleaner and rain-damp air. Graham turned back to the screen. The folder sat there untouched, like a fragile gift. He unzipped it and found only a few recovered files, invoices, employee records, and one curious note dated years earlier. It was a company memo he barely remembered writing. The first line read, "Every system deserves a backup. Every person does too. M. He leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly. The words felt foreign, as if written by a better version of himself. Somewhere between the boardrooms and contracts, that man had vanished. From outside, the rain softened to a mist. Below, the city shimmered with lights reflecting on wet streets, taxis sliding past puddles, diners still open for the night shift crowd. For the first time in years, Graham wondered what it might be like to sit in one of those small booths, drink burnt coffee, and listen to ordinary people talk about their ordinary lives. His computer pinged. The network was attempting to reconnect. The server blinked, showing partial restoration enough to give him hope, but not enough to breathe easy. He rubbed his temples, exhaustion creeping in. The weight of years pressed against his chest. On the desk, the monitor flickered again. The restored folder glowed faintly, the file name shimmering as if alive. Second Chance. It was almost poetic. He looked around the vast office, the art on the walls, the gold trim, the silence so complete it rang in his ears. All the success in the world, and yet no one to call, no one who'd care if he didn't make it home tonight. When the elevator doors finally closed on the lower floor, he caught one last sound, the squeal of the janitor's cart and her quiet humming drifting up the shaft. The melody was simple, almost childlike, but it stayed with him long after she was gone. Graham opened the memo again and stared at that line. Every system deserves a backup. Maybe she was right. Maybe she had fixed more than a file tonight. He walked to the window, pressing his hand against the cold glass. Outside, rain pooled under the streetlights, scattering light like broken mirrors. He thought of her, a woman he didn't know, stepping into his chaos without hesitation. Somewhere inside him, something small shifted, something that hadn't moved in years. Rain kept tapping on the glass while she walked away quietly, leaving Graham staring at the only file that had survived, one she had named Second Chance. Morning came gray and cold over Portland. The streets glistened after the long night of rain, and the Willamette River carried thin streaks of fog along its slow current. At the corner of Bridgeport Diner, the neon sign buzzed back to life: hot coffee, fresh pie. The smell of bacon and apple crumble drifted out each time the door opened. Graham Westbrook sat alone in a booth near the window, nursing a cup of black coffee gone lukewarm. His suit jacket hung over the backrest, and his tie was tucked loosely into his shirt pocket. He looked nothing like the confident man whose photo still graced the cover of Pacific Business Review. His eyes were tired, the kind of tired that doesn't come from lack of sleep but from being emptied out. He had come here without really knowing why. Perhaps because the tower felt haunted now. Every flicker of light, every beep of a server reminded him of that folder named Second Chance. He couldn't stop thinking about it, or about the woman who had created it. The waitress, a friendly woman in her 50s with a silver name tag reading Darla, topped off his cup. "You look like you could use another slice of pie, honey," she said, her Oregon drawl warm as cinnamon. He almost smiled. "Maybe later. I'm waiting for someone." "All right, sweetheart," she said, and walked off to greet a couple of regulars by the counter. He wasn't actually waiting for anyone, but as fate would have it, the bell over the diner door jingled, and there she was. Elena Morales. Her hair was pulled back in the same braid, her uniform traded for a denim jacket and a simple plaid shirt. She looked smaller somehow, sitting at the counter with a plate of apple pie and a steaming cup of coffee, reading from a worn paperback. Graham hesitated for a moment, then stood and approached her. "Elena?" She looked up, surprised, then smiled politely. "Mr. Westbrook, you survived the night." "I suppose I did," he said, sliding onto the stool beside her. "I never got to thank you properly." "No need," she replied. "You were the one drowning. I just handed you a rope." He couldn't help but notice the calmness in her tone, not humble, not boastful, just certain. It intrigued him more than he cared to admit. "You said you used to fix that kind of mess," he said. "What did you mean?" She set her fork down, the metal clinking softly against the plate. "I used to work in systems engineering before my mother got sick. After that, cleaning buildings was simpler, predictable." The answer hung between them. Graham didn't know what to say. The waitress passed by and refilled both their coffees without a word. Outside, the sun broke weakly through the clouds, lighting the diner in a soft golden haze. "Why didn't you ever go back?" he asked at last. She looked out the window, watching the rain slide down the glass. Sometimes, when you lose something once, you stop believing you can have it again. Graham stirred his coffee, realizing she wasn't talking about jobs. At a nearby booth, an older man, Henry Cole, a retired engineer who spent mornings with the crossword and black coffee, glanced up. "Smart people don't always wear suits, son," he said with a friendly grin. "And sometimes, the ones with mops know the real way to clean up." Elena chuckled softly. "Henry's been coming here longer than this diner's been standing." Henry shrugged. "Maybe. But truth's truth." Then he went back to his crossword, leaving them in thoughtful silence. Graham looked at Elena again. "You did more than save a file, you know." "I just cleaned a mess," she said, her eyes still on the window. "That's what I do." He wanted to say more, but his phone vibrated another message from Margot Lane, his CFO, demanding answers about the breach. He ignored it, for once. For the first time in years, work could wait. He reached for his wallet. "Would you join me for breakfast tomorrow? Maybe tell me how you learned to fix what others couldn't?" She hesitated, then smiled. "I have the night shift again. But maybe after that." He nodded. "After that, then." She stood, tucked the paper back into her jacket, and walked toward the door. The morning sun caught on her name tag, Elena Morales, and reflected a thin ray of light across the table, warm and fleeting. The bell above the diner door jingled as she stepped outside. Graham watched her cross the street, the morning breeze tugging gently at her braid. The way she moved calm, certain, yet carrying something heavy, left him strangely unsettled. He hadn't felt this kind of curiosity about anyone in a long time. He sat for a while longer, tracing the rim of his coffee cup with one finger. Darla came by again and placed the check on the table, giving him a knowing smile. "She's one of the good ones," she said quietly. "Always leaves a tip, even when she's the one working hardest." Graham nodded, slipping a few bills under the saucer. "Yeah," he said softly. "I think I can tell." Outside, the drizzle had stopped. He pulled on his jacket and stepped into the street, the faint scent of wet pavement and maple leaves following him. Cars hissed past, tires cutting through shallow puddles. Across from the diner, he spotted Elena again, standing by a bus stop with her lunch bag tucked under one arm. For a brief moment, their eyes met. She smiled just enough to acknowledge him, and then looked away as the bus arrived. He watched her climb aboard, then disappear into the blur of raindrops and city noise. That evening, the tower felt different, quieter somehow. When Graham arrived, the night crew was already at work. Janitors, security, the quiet heartbeat of a company that never really slept. He passed through the hallways, his polished shoes echoing faintly, and saw Elena down the corridor. She was pushing her cart again, earbuds in, humming the same tune from the night before. For a moment, he just stood there watching her. Not in the way a boss studies an employee, but the way someone watches a moment they don't want to interrupt. He cleared his throat softly. "You keep strange hours, Miss Morales." She pulled one earbud out and smiled. "Someone has to keep the lights on, Mr. Westbrook." He gestured toward the server room. "I was hoping you might take another look at the system. It's still not running the way it should." She blinked, surprised. "You want me to?" "Yes," he said, trying to sound casual. "I could use another pair of eyes, someone who isn't afraid of dust." Her laugh was quiet but real. "All right then, just don't tell your tech guys the janitor's been in their playground." Together, they walked down the hall to the data center. The room glowed with rows of machines, blinking in a rhythm that felt almost alive. Elena leaned over the terminal, typing quickly, scanning through lines of damaged code. Graham stood beside her, watching the reflection of the screens in her eyes. "You know," he said quietly, "most people would have walked away that night. You didn't." She didn't look up. "Maybe I've seen too many things that needed cleaning to walk away from one more." He smiled faintly. "That's not just a job. That's a calling." She shrugged, her fingers never stopping. "Or just habit. Either way, it gets things fixed." For a long moment, the only sound was the hum of the machines. Outside, rain began again, softer this time, a whisper against the windows. Something about it felt less like loneliness, more like calm. When they finished, she saved a backup file and stood. "There," she said. "That should hold for now." He nodded, still looking at the screen but thinking of her words. She gathered her things and started toward the elevator. "Elena," he called after her. She turned, one hand on the cart handle. "If you ever want to come back," he said, "to engineering, I mean I could make that happen." Her expression softened, almost sad. "Thank you. But some things can't just be switched back on, Mr. Westbrook." She gave him a small nod and left. The elevator doors closed, and her reflection vanished from the glass panels. He stood there, alone with the hum of the servers and the faint scent of lemon cleaner. On the monitor, the system logs blinked steadily alive again. For now. Outside, the city lights shimmered through the rain. As she walked out into the morning drizzle, Graham noticed her name tag catching the sunlight, Elena Morales. He whispered it like a code he didn't know he'd need to remember. By the time the next night fell over Portland, the tower glowed like a glass lantern in the drizzle. The hum of generators mixed with the distant sound of rain, steady and hypnotic. Elena arrived for her shift a few minutes early, her dark hair tucked under a knit cap, her hands wrapped around a cheap cup of diner coffee. She nodded to the guard at the lobby desk, who barely looked up from his crossword, and made her way toward the elevator. Upstairs, Graham Westbrook was still in his office. He hadn't left since morning. His tie was gone. The sleeves of his white shirt rolled to his elbows. On his desk sat the same file she had restored. Second, chance, zip. He had opened it a dozen times, each time finding something else, tiny fragments of data that refused to disappear. Maybe it wasn't just a file. Maybe it was a reminder. When the elevator doors opened, Elena stepped out quietly, her shoes squeaking on the marble. Graham looked up. "You're here early," he said. She smiled lightly. "So are you. I never left." "That's not healthy," she said, setting her coffee cup on his desk. "You look like someone who hasn't had a proper meal in days." He smirked. "You sound like my mother." "Then you should probably listen," she replied, turning to the computer screens. "The system's still unstable. Mind if I take a look?" He gestured toward the keyboard. "Be my guest." Elena began typing, eyes narrowing as lines of corrupted code scrolled past. "Whoever did this wasn't an amateur," she said. "They wanted to hurt you personally." Graham leaned back. "That's comforting." "It's also unusual," she continued. "This kind of sabotage doesn't happen without inside access." He frowned. "You think it's someone from my team?" Before she could answer, the door opened, and Colton Reeves walked in, a tall man in his late 30s with slicked hair and an expensive watch. "Boss, I got your message," he said. "Didn't realize you were entertaining company." His tone dripped with disdain. Elena turned briefly. "Just doing some maintenance." Colton smirked. "On our main servers? I didn't know janitorial services came with coding skills." Graham's voice hardened. "Colton, that's enough. She's helping me review the logs." Colton hesitated, then forced a smile. "Sure thing, sir. But maybe next time. Let the professionals handle it." Wouldn't want to confuse the cleaning staff. He turned and left, his cologne lingering unpleasantly in the air. Elena said nothing. Her fingers never stopped moving. But Graham could feel the tension hanging between them, the weight of a man who'd been cruel to someone who didn't deserve it, and a woman who'd learned to let silence speak louder than anger. Minutes later, Elena froze. "There it is," she said. "A hidden back door. See this string? It's a duplicate user credential. Someone's been copying your internal keys and rerouting them." Graham leaned closer. "Who has clearance for that?" "Only upper management," she said quietly. "Maybe your CTO, Ari." Colton's name appeared faintly on one of the access logs. The timestamp matched the night of the breach. Graham's jaw tightened. So, it was him. Elena saved the evidence to a flash drive and ejected it carefully. "Don't jump too fast," she said. "People do strange things under pressure. Maybe he was framed, or maybe he made a mistake." He looked at her, surprised. "You're defending him?" "I'm just saying, truth has layers. Don't peel too fast, or it falls apart." Before he could reply, the lights flickered. The screens flashed once, then stabilized. A new line of text appeared in red, pulsing slowly across the monitor. "Trust no one inside." The words seemed to glow in the dim office, eerie against the steady hum of the servers. Elena stared at them, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. "That's not part of the system," she murmured. "Someone just sent that live." Graham straightened. "Who?" She shook her head. "No ID trace. Whoever it was, they knew exactly how to cover their tracks." He stepped closer. What does it mean? Elena saved the message screenshot to the flash drive and slipped it into her pocket. It means you've got a leak and they're warning us to stop looking. He frowned, tension tightening his jaw. If you're right, I'll have to bring in security. No, she said quickly. That's the last thing you should do. If this is someone inside, they'll be watching every move you make. Graham hesitated, his reflection sharp in the dark glass. You're suggesting I do nothing? I'm suggesting you keep the systems running, she replied softly, her tone firm but calm. Let them think they've scared you off. I'll look into it quietly from the outside. He turned toward her. Elena, that's not your job. Her eyes met his. Neither was fixing your servers, but I did it anyway. Sometimes people like me, we see what others overlook. The room fell into silence, filled only by the rhythm of rain against the window. She unplugged her laptop and began packing her tools. Dangerous is when you ignore problems because they're messy, she added, voice low but steady. I deal with messes. The elevator chimed softly in the distance. Graham followed her to the door. At least let me have someone drive you home, he offered. She shook her head. I take the bus. The night's quieter that way. Oh, Elena, he said, almost under his breath. Be careful, she smiled faintly. Careful doesn't fix anything, Mr. Westbrook. As the elevator doors closed, he caught one last glimpse of her face, tired but determined, half lit by the glow of the floor indicators. Then she was gone, leaving behind the faint scent of lemon polish and coffee. Graham stood alone, staring at the empty hallway. The red text on the screen still pulsed in the darkness, like a heartbeat, steady and ominous. He sat back at his desk, every instinct screaming to dig deeper. But something in him knew she was right. Whoever was behind this was still inside. He opened the restored folder one more time. The second chance file blinked quietly in the corner of the screen, as if waiting for him to make a move. For the first time, he didn't touch it. Downstairs, Elena stepped into the silent lobby. The guard's chair was empty, his crossword puzzle half finished. A clock ticked faintly in the distance. She walked toward the glass doors, her reflection following her in the dark pane. The USB in her pocket felt heavier than it should. As she pushed open the door, a low whisper brushed past her ear so faint she almost thought she imagined it. You're digging too deep, Miss Morales. Her body froze. The lobby behind her was empty. Only the rain moved, sliding down the windows in thin silver lines. She turned slowly, scanning the shadows. Nothing. No one. Outside, the drizzle thickened into real rain. She pulled her coat tight around her shoulders and stepped out into the night. The city light smeared across the wet pavement, and her footsteps echoed as she disappeared into the glow of the street lamps, unaware that a pair of headlights had flickered once, then twice, before vanishing into the darkness. Morning came late to Portland. A pale sun pushed through a curtain of fog, casting a dull silver glow across the Bridgeport diner. The smell of pancakes and fresh coffee lingered in the air, wrapping the place in quiet comfort. Elena Morales sat at a corner booth, her eyes shadowed from another sleepless night. A half-eaten waffle sat untouched before her, its syrup turning cold. Across from her, a small boy balanced a crayon between his fingers, drawing crooked lines across a paper placemat. Caleb, her 8-year-old nephew, wore a blue hoodie 2 sizes too big. Tia, he said, frowning at his drawing. Does this look like a robot or a toaster? She smiled faintly. Both. Maybe it's a robot that makes toast. He laughed, proud of the answer. She watched him for a moment, letting his joy soak through her exhaustion. The flash drive in her purse felt heavier with every passing hour. She hadn't told anyone about what happened in the lobby, about the voice that had whispered her name through an empty room. Maybe it was nerves, maybe exhaustion, or maybe someone really was watching. The diner door opened, letting in a gust of cool air. Graham Westbrook stepped inside, looking almost human without his armor of perfection. He wore a gray wool coat, his tie loosened, his eyes softer than usual. He hesitated before walking over. Mind if I join you? Elena looked up from her coffee. Sure, but you'll have to fight him for space. She nodded toward Caleb, who was now drawing rocket ships. Graham smiled. I think I can manage. He slid into the booth, glancing at the boy. You must be Caleb. Caleb grinned. You're the man from Tia's work, the one who breaks computers." Elena laughed, covering her mouth. Graham chuckled too, shaking his head. That's one way to put it. Darla, the waitress, appeared with her usual cheer. "Morning, folks. The usual for you, sweetheart?" she asked Elena. "Yes, please," Elena said. "And for him," she nodded toward Graham, "black coffee, 2 sugars." Darla winked. "I'll bring an extra slice of apple pie. He looks like he needs it." She walked off, humming softly. For a while, they just sat there, listening to the jukebox hum, an old tune. The diner felt like a small pocket of peace inside a noisy world. Graham finally spoke. "You didn't call last night. I was worried." "I didn't think CEOs stayed up worrying about janitors," she replied gently. "I don't," he said, meeting her gaze. "But I stayed up worrying about you, Em." Something flickered behind her eyes, something she quickly hid behind a polite smile. "I'm fine, just tired." "You're not fine," he said quietly. "Something happened." She looked down at her coffee cup. There was a voice in the lobby. It said I was digging too deep. Graham's fingers tightened around his cup. "You're sure you weren't followed?" "I didn't see anyone," she said. "But whoever left that message in the system, they know what I found. They don't want me near it." "Ugh." He leaned closer. "You shouldn't be here alone." She shook her head. "Don't make this bigger than it already is. I can handle myself." Caleb looked up, sensing the tension. "Tia, are you in trouble?" Helena softened, placing a hand on his. "No, cariño, just work stuff." Graham hesitated, watching the exchange. He realized he didn't just see an employee anymore. He saw someone who carried an entire world quietly on her shoulders. Outside, rain began again, tapping against the diner windows like small, impatient fingers. Elena's phone buzzed on the table. She glanced at it and froze. A message glowed across the screen. "Stop asking questions." She swallowed hard, locking the phone quickly. Graham caught the look in her eyes. "Another warning?" he asked. She nodded. Whoever this is, they're not bluffing. The door jingled again as a delivery man walked in, shaking water from his jacket. Elena glanced over instinctively and noticed a black SUV parked across the street, its engine idling. Her pulse quickened. Graham turned to look, but she stopped him with a whisper. "Don't. Not yet." He followed her eyes anyway. The SUV's windows were tinted, impossible to see inside. A chill crept down his spine. Elena grabbed the check, slid a few bills beneath it, and stood. "We should go." He stood too. "Elena, later," she said firmly, her voice low. "I'll call you." As they stepped outside, the drizzle soaked her jacket instantly. Caleb clung to her hand. Graham opened his mouth to insist on driving them home, but the SUV's headlights flashed twice before pulling away. The sound of its tires hissing against wet asphalt lingered like a warning neither of them could ignore. They stood on the sidewalk as the SUV disappeared into the blur of rain and traffic. For a few seconds, no one spoke. The smell of wet asphalt and coffee drifted through the air, mingling with the faint sound of the diner's bell closing behind them. Elena pulled Caleb's hood over his head, forcing a steady tone into her voice. "Come on, kiddo. Let's get you to school." Graham walked beside them, his coat soaked through, but his expression unreadable. "You can't ignore this, Elena," he said quietly. "I'm not ignoring it," she replied. "I'm just choosing not to panic." He gave a short, almost disbelieving laugh. "That's a skill I never mastered." They reached her old blue sedan parked under a flickering streetlight. The car coughed to life after 2 attempts. Caleb leaned forward from the back seat, peering at Graham through the window. "You should smile more, mister," he said seriously. "You look nicer when you do." Graham blinked, startled by the honesty of it, then managed a small grin. "I'll work on that, buddy." "Em?" Elena started the car, but before pulling away, she lowered the window. "Stay inside your office today," she said. "Lock the doors if you have to. Someone's pushing hard to scare us off. That means we're close to something." He nodded slowly. "You really think it's worth the risk?" She met his eyes through the rain-streaked glass. "I don't think. I know." The car rolled away, merging into the slow stream of morning traffic. Graham stood there until the taillights vanished. The fog thickened, curling around the street like smoke. Something in him twisted fear, admiration, guilt, he couldn't tell which. But he knew one thing. If anything happened to her, he'd never forgive himself. Back at the office, the day unfolded with its usual chaos. Colton Reeves stormed in and out of meetings, snapping at assistants. The board demanded updates. Everyone whispered about system failures, pretending not to notice the CEO's strained expression. By late afternoon, Graham retreated to his office, shutting the door against the noise. On his desk, a small envelope sat where none had been before. No name, no return address. He opened it carefully. Inside was a single photograph, grainy, black and white, showing the diner that morning. Elena, Graham, and Caleb sitting together in the booth. Someone had taken the picture from outside. A chill ran down his back. He turned the photo over. On the back, written in thin, uneven handwriting, were 3 words. "She's next, Graham." He sank into his chair, staring at the message until the letters blurred. His first instinct was to call her, but he stopped. If they were being watched, even a call could expose her. The office lights flickered once, twice, then steadied. He exhaled, gripping the photo in one hand, his phone in the other. Meanwhile, a few miles away, Elena parked outside her apartment building, unaware of the shadow that lingered across the street. She helped Caleb with his backpack, kissed his forehead, and watched him run toward the entrance with his usual burst of energy. The sight softened her for a moment. She almost believed the world was normal again. Then her phone buzzed. A new email. No subject line, no sender. She hesitated before opening it. Inside was a single attachment, a photo. Her and Graham sitting in the diner, taken from the same angle as the one now in his office. Her breath caught. Beneath it, a short line of text appeared. "Stop, or the next picture will be closer." The phone slipped slightly in her hand. Outside, a car door shut softly somewhere down the street. She turned, her pulse racing. The street looked empty, but she could feel eyes somewhere in the mist, watching, waiting. She locked the phone, slipped it into her bag, and whispered to herself, "You picked the wrong person to scare." The camera of a parked SUV across the street clicked once, the red light blinking faintly before disappearing into darkness. Rain returned that night, steady and cold, drumming against the tall glass windows of Westbrook Industries. The city outside shimmered like 1,000 broken stars, reflected on wet pavement. Graham sat alone in his office, the lights dimmed, the photograph still lying face down on his desk. He hadn't told anyone about the message. Not his board, not Colton, not even security. Some things, he decided, were better handled quietly. A soft chime echoed from the elevator. The doors slid open, revealing Elena Morales, her dark coat damp, a faint exhaustion under her eyes. She held a folder against her chest. "You didn't answer my calls," she said. "I figured you'd come anyway," he replied, motioning her inside. "You always do." She glanced at the coffee pot on the credenza empty. "You haven't slept." He gave a dry smile. "Neither have you." For a moment, neither spoke. The hum of the building filled the silence, a constant reminder of the power still flickering through its veins. Then Elena set the folder down, opening it to reveal printed server logs marked with red ink. "I found it," she said. "The leak." Graham leaned forward. "Where?" "Inside finance," she answered. "Someone rerouted encrypted communications through an inactive vendor channel. It's clever, looks like old accounting data, but it's a live tunnel." He scanned the pages, eyes narrowing. "Valerie Soto," he murmured. "She's been head of finance since the merger. Are you sure?" Elena nodded slowly. "Her signature keys match the transfers, but the pattern's too careful for a single person. She's either being used or she's leading them." He exhaled through his nose, rubbing the back of his neck. "I trusted her for 10 years. Then she knows exactly how to hurt you," Elena said softly. He looked up, catching the glint of concern in her eyes. It wasn't just professional, it was personal, protective, something she didn't bother to hide anymore. "You shouldn't be here," he said. "If they're watching you, coming here was dangerous." She gave a small shrug. "Danger's a part of cleaning up messes, remember?" He almost smiled. "You keep saying that like it's a badge of honor." "It's survival," she corrected. "The same thing you've been doing since this started." Thunder rolled in the distance. The lights flickered once, casting long shadows over the glass office. Graham turned to the window, his reflection fractured by raindrops. "If Valerie's behind this, it's bigger than corporate theft. Someone's funding it. Elena closed the folder. I traced a fragment of the outgoing traffic Zurich, offshore accounts. Same network that funded the earlier breach. Rodrigo's people, he muttered. They never stopped. She nodded. They just got smarter. He sank into his chair, running both hands through his hair. So what's the play? We expose it, she said firmly. Quietly. If we go to the board without proof, Valerie will bury everything before sunrise. But if we monitor her next move, we can trap whoever's pulling the strings. He looked at her, half in disbelief, half in admiration. You sound like someone who's done this before. I used to work in cyber forensics before my mother got sick, she said simply. Then I learned there's not much difference between cleaning a system and cleaning a floor. Both require removing what people try to hide. The words landed heavier than she intended. Graham's gaze softened. You know, you're not invisible anymore, Elena. She smiled faintly. I was never invisible. You just weren't looking. He opened his mouth to answer, but the intercom on his desk crackled suddenly. A security guard's voice broke through, tight with static. Sir, you might want to see this. The east loading dock camera just picked up movement. Graham hit the button. Who? Can't tell. Looks like someone tried to disable the feed. They're still out there. Elena's pulse quickened. They're watching the building again. He grabbed his jacket. Stay here. Not a chance, she said, already moving toward the door. Together they stepped into the empty hallway. The hum of fluorescent lights sounded louder now, almost unnatural. Somewhere below, the faint echo of footsteps moved through the loading bay. Elena motioned for silence and crouched near the railing, scanning the shadows. A figure in a dark raincoat crossed the lower level, heading toward the service entrance, the same one she had used countless nights before. When the motion sensor lights flickered on, the figure turned briefly toward the camera. It wasn't a stranger. It was Valerie Soto. Elena froze, her breath catching in her throat. That's her, she whispered. Valerie Soto. Down below, the woman moved with the calm precision of someone who'd done this before. A black umbrella shielded her face, but her stride was unmistakable, steady, confident, too sure of herself for someone sneaking into a restricted area. She carried a slim metal case and a phone pressed to her ear, her voice faint, but clear enough to carry through the corridor's echo. Graham's jaw tightened as he strained to listen. Yes, the transfer's ready, Valerie said. Once the files upload, we cut the line. Zurich gets what they paid for. Westbrook Industries collapses quietly. Elena and Graham exchanged a quick look. She mouthed, record it. He already had his phone in hand. Valerie paused near the service terminal, typing rapidly. A faint blue glow illuminated her face, focused, unhurried. She inserted a flash drive into the console, and the screen flickered. Lines of data began streaming across it, mirrored in Elena's mind like a pulse of betrayal. She's siphoning the database, Elena said. If she finishes, every client file, every contract will be gone. Graham's hands clenched into fists. Not again, M? Without waiting for permission, Elena slipped off her heels and started down the stairwell. He tried to grab her arm. Elena, wait! She looked back at him, eyes sharp and steady. You said you trusted me. Don't stop now. The sound of her footsteps was swallowed by the hum of the building. When she reached the lower floor, she stayed low, ducking behind the support beams. Valerie was still focused on the screen, muttering under her breath. 10 more %. Elena stepped out from the shadows. You always did good math, Valerie, she said quietly. But you miscalculated this time. Valerie jerked around, startled, her eyes narrowing when she recognized her. You? Funny. Elena continued, walking closer. For a woman who manages millions, you're awfully careless about where you plug things in. Valerie straightened, her tone sharp as glass. You think you understand what this company is, Miss Morales? You don't. This place isn't about innovation, it's about survival. And some of us don't get second chances unless we take them. Selling out your team isn't taking a chance. It's giving up your soul, Elena said. Valerie smirked. You sound just like him. Then maybe he was right about you. For a heartbeat, silence filled the space, just the hiss of rain against the loading doors, the hum of machines, the tension of two women standing on opposite sides of a moral line. Then the terminal beeped. Upload complete. Valerie yanked the flash drive from the port and turned to leave, but Graham appeared at the top of the stairs. Going somewhere? His voice cut through the air like steel. Valerie stopped dead. For the first time, her expression faltered. Graham, don't, he said, descending slowly. Not after everything. Her composure returned like a mask. You think you built this empire alone? You used me, my work, my silence. I was there every time you closed another deal, and I got nothing while you soaked in praise. You had everything, he said. A future, respect, trust. She laughed bitterly. Respect doesn't pay for loyalty, Graham. Money does. Before he could answer, she pulled a small remote from her pocket and pressed it. The terminal screen went black. Elena rushed forward, typing furiously. But the damage was done, the data transfer had completed, and the copy was gone. She sent it, Elena whispered. Valerie turned toward the exit. You can't stop what's already out there. Graham's voice lowered, rough and heavy with exhaustion. Maybe not, but you can't run forever. He nodded to Elena. She had already anticipated his thought. A soft click sounded as she lifted her phone, recording the entire confession. Valerie's face drained of color. You're both fools, she spat. You have no idea who you're dealing with. Then tell us, Elena said. Valerie hesitated, her jaw trembling for just a second. They're not going to stop with me, she said finally. You think this is about corporate greed? This is about control. Data is power, and you… She cut off mid-sentence, her gaze darting past them. Graham turned. The glass door to the loading dock stood ajar, rain spilling inside and behind it, the faint silhouette of someone watching, a man in a dark coat. The same figure Elena had glimpsed outside the diner. He stepped back into the storm before either of them could move. Valerie's voice dropped to a whisper. You're already on their list. Then, before they could stop her, she tossed the flash drive into a puddle and ran into the rain, vanishing into the night. Elena knelt, picking up the soaked drive carefully. We can still extract something, she said. Graham exhaled, staring at the open doorway. Do it. And Elena? His voice softened. Don't go home tonight. End a visa. She looked up at him, the glow of the emergency lights painting her face in shades of gold and fear. You think they'll come for me? I think they already have. Outside, thunder cracked over the city, and somewhere beneath it, a siren began to wail, a low, distant sound that promised nothing good. By dawn, Portland's skyline glowed faintly beneath a curtain of gray. The rain had stopped, but the air still carried its weight heavy, metallic, full of something unspoken. In the 22nd floor conference room, only two people were awake. Elena Morales and Graham Westbrook. The city stretched beyond the glass walls, still half asleep, unaware that the company towering above it was sitting on a secret that could ruin them all. Elena stood beside a digital display, her hair pulled back, a cup of untouched coffee cooling in her hand. Valerie's flash drive was corrupted, she said, her tone clipped. But not completely. I salvaged fragments, logs, transfers, and one encrypted route that kept repeating. Graham leaned on the table, eyes bloodshot. Where does it lead? She tapped the screen. A world map lit up. Zurich, then New York, then back here. Whoever's running this operation has a node in the city. He frowned. So they're close. Closer than we thought, she replied. If we trigger the right bait, we can force them to act. Make them think Valerie's still transmitting. His expression hardened. You're talking about setting a trap. I'm talking about ending this, she said. He hesitated. And what happens if they realize you're not her? Elena gave a wry smile. Then I'll improvise. Graham shook his head, half in disbelief, half in admiration. You have no idea what kind of people you're dealing with. I cleaned offices for 5 years, she said softly. You learn to recognize shadows when they move wrong. And they exchanged a look that said more than either would admit respect, fear, something deeper threading between them. Across the table, the office lights flickered as the system rebooted under Elena's command. I'll open a mirrored port, she explained. They'll think the data stream is genuine. Once they connect, I can trace their route back to the original source. And if they hit back, then we'll know who we're fighting. The elevator chimed behind them. Both turned sharply, but it was only Colton Reeves, stepping out with his usual smirk and an oversized cup of espresso. Morning, boss. Looks like you pulled an all-nighter. Again, his eyes landed on Elena. And the janitor's still around? Guess overtime pays well. Graham's voice turned cold. You're early, Colton. Couldn't sleep, he said, strolling closer. Lots of rumors flying around. About leaks, missing money, people disappearing. You wouldn't be keeping secrets from me, would you? Not everything's your concern, Graham replied. Colton chuckled. You know, for someone who runs a tech empire, you sure attract strange company. His gaze flicked to Elena, sharp and assessing. Careful, Mr. Westbrook. Not everyone in this building wants to help you. Before Graham could respond, Elena turned to him with deliberate calm. You're right, she said. Some just come to talk. Colton's smirk froze. Excuse me? She held his stare. You accessed the East server room at 11:47 p.m. last night. That's restricted after hours. Want to explain? He blinked, caught off guard. I was checking security feeds. Valerie asked me to. Valerie's gone, Graham said quietly. Try again. Colton's eyes flicked between them. For the first time, a flicker of uncertainty crossed his face. You've got the wrong idea, he said, his voice tightening. I've been loyal to this company since day one. Elena stepped closer, her tone steady. Then you won't mind if we check your workstation. Every keystroke, every transfer. Colton's jaw clenched. This is ridiculous. Maybe, she said. But it's funny how the only people who call things ridiculous are the ones who are scared. The silence stretched. Then he turned on his heel. You'll regret this, he muttered, storming out of the room. The door closed behind him with a sharp click. Graham exhaled. You think he's involved? I think Valerie wasn't working alone, Elena said, eyes on the screen. And I think he just confirmed it. Graham rubbed the bridge of his nose. If they're both tied to this, then someone higher up is pulling the strings. We need proof. She nodded. Then we give them something to chase. Within minutes, Elena began typing commands, setting up the bait file, a reconstruction of the original corporate ledger Valerie had tried to steal. The words Project Genesis flashed on the screen, bait for anyone who knew what it meant. As the file uploaded to the decoy server, Graham watched her fingers move quick, sure, fearless. You ever miss the quiet? He asked softly. Elena smiled faintly without looking up. This is the quiet. You just haven't learned how to listen to it yet. Outside, lightning forked across the horizon. In that white flash, both of them caught the reflection of their own faces in the glass. Two people who had lost everything once and were now standing on the edge of something even riskier. The system beeped once. It's live, she said. Now we wait. Graham turned toward her. For what? She leaned back, eyes still on the screen. For them to take the bait. Hours passed. The rain returned in thin silver sheets, whispering against the tower's glass. The mirrored file sat in the system like a piece of bait on still water, innocent to the untrained eye, deadly to whoever took the first bite. Elena sat cross-legged on the office floor, her laptop glowing in the half-dark. The room smelled faintly of coffee and tension. Graham paced behind her, hands buried in his pockets. It's been 3 hours, he muttered. Maybe they're smarter than we thought. They're cautious, she said. There's a difference. Now, he stopped by the window, staring at the reflection of the city lights. What if they never bite? Elena looked up. Then at least we'll know they're scared of us now. He smiled faintly, but it didn't last. His phone buzzed on the desk, a message from an unknown number. Nice trap. Shame it won't save you. Before he could respond, Elena's screen flickered. A new connection appeared on the decoy server. Then another, and another, encrypted lines of data tunneling in from 3 continents. She sat up straight. They're in. Can you trace it? I'm trying, she said, her fingers flying across the keyboard. It's bouncing through layers of proxies. Wait! The code shifted suddenly, adapting to her trace. Whoever was on the other end wasn't running an automated script. They were alive, watching. A message appeared across her monitor. Hello, Miss Morales. Her blood ran cold. They know my name. Graham leaned over her shoulder. Kill the connection. Not yet, she said, her voice tight. We can still pin their location. The cursor on the screen moved without her touching it. Another message appeared. Trust is a dangerous luxury. The office lights flickered, and the server fans kicked into overdrive. Alarms beeped faintly from the control room. Elena's hands moved faster, fighting to keep the mirror stable. They're trying to fry the system, force an overload. Can you stop it? Not for long. Sweat gathered at her temple, but I can redirect them, make them think they succeeded. How? By crashing my own feed. Before he could stop her, she typed a final string of code and hit enter. The screens went black. The hum of electronics cut out, plunging the room into silence broken only by the distant rumble of thunder. Graham stared at her. Did it work? She exhaled shakily. They think we're dead. A few seconds later, emergency lights flickered on dim, amber, and trembling. She unplugged her laptop, her fingers trembling slightly. We'll have to reboot everything from a clean drive. But I got something before the crash, a location tag. Where? She turned the screen toward him. A map loaded slowly, the cursor blinking over one name. Pier 19. Portland Docks. Graham frowned. The shipping yard. Looks like their next drop point, she said. If we can intercept whoever shows up, we can end this. He shook his head. That's not safe for you. I'm? She gave him a tired smile. Neither was cleaning your office at 2 a.m., but I survived that too. Elena, she stood, shouldering her bag. You don't have to come, but I'm going. He hesitated, then sighed. I'm not letting you face this alone. Her eyes softened. You might regret saying that. They left through the service elevator, the city lights flickering like distant warnings. Outside, the wind had picked up, carrying the scent of the river and old metal. The night felt charged, like something was waiting. As they reached the parking level, Graham's phone buzzed again. Another message from the same number. Pier 19 is where stories end. He looked at Elena. She'd already read it over his shoulder. Then let's make sure, she said quietly. This one ends our way. They climbed into his car and drove toward the waterfront. The tower lights faded behind them, replaced by the dark silhouette of cranes and ships. Rain streaked across the windshield, blurring the world into motion. Neither spoke for several minutes. Finally, Graham broke the silence. You ever think about walking away? Elena watched the road ahead, her face lit by the glow of passing streetlights. Every day, she said. And every day, I remember someone has to stay and clean up the mess. He looked at her then. Really looked and realized how much she reminded him of the person he used to be before greed and guilt dulled his heart. When they reached the docks, the night swallowed them whole. The sound of waves slapping against steel mixed with the groan of cargo cranes shifting in the wind. Somewhere in the darkness, a single light flickered inside Warehouse 3. Elena glanced at him, her hand hovering near the door handle. That's our signal. Graham nodded. Then let's finish this. The car door opened with a metallic click, and the rain met them like a curtain falling on the last act. The docks were nearly deserted when they arrived. A mist hung over the river, wrapping the cargo cranes and warehouses in silence. The smell of salt and rust filled the air. Somewhere far off, a buoy bell rang, a lonely sound swallowed by the wind. Graham parked behind a line of empty containers. This is where Valerie's signal ended, he said quietly. Elena scanned the shadows. Warehouse 3. The lights still on. They moved together, careful and silent. Water dripped from the steel roof above. A forklift stood abandoned, its headlights dim. Inside the warehouse, a faint glow pulsed from a laptop sitting on a crate. Elena nodded once. That's it. They approached slowly. On the laptop screen, a message blinked in looping red text. Welcome back, Mr. Westbrook. Graham's breath caught. They knew we'd come. A noise echoed behind them, boots on wet concrete. Elena turned just as a shadow stepped out from the dark. It wasn't Valerie. It was Colton. He held up his phone, smirking. You two should have stayed out of this. Elena's eyes hardened. You were part of it all along, Colton shrugged. Everyone's part of something. I just picked the winning side. Before Graham could answer, headlights flared through the warehouse doors. A black SUV rolled inside, tires hissing against puddles. The same kind that had followed them for days. Elena whispered, They're here. Colton smiled wider. Oh, they've always been here. Rain hammered the metal roof as the SUV came to a stop. Its engine hummed low, steady, predatory. Two men stepped out, faces hidden by hoods, movements rehearsed and calm. One of them carried a briefcase, the other a gun. Colton raised a hand. "Easy, I've got them." Elena's pulse quickened, but her eyes stayed fixed on the laptop. She whispered to Graham, "They want the drive Valerie made. Pretend we still have it." He nodded slightly. "Play along." The man with the gun gestured. "Where's the data?" Graham met his gaze. "Safe. Somewhere you'll never reach." The man stepped closer, his voice cold. "Wrong answer." Before he could react, Elena hit a key on the laptop. The screen flashed white, and a shrill tone filled the room, the signal of a live trace she'd secretly reactivated. A small tracker beacon hidden under the table blinked once. Graham's phone vibrated an alert from the security system she'd tied to the bait file. Location transmitted. Backup was on its way. Colton realized too late what was happening. "What did you do?" he shouted. "Cleaned up another mess," she said. He lunged for the laptop, but Graham intercepted him. The two men struggled, crashing into a stack of crates. One splintered, spilling metal tools across the floor. The sound echoed like gunfire. The man with the weapon raised his arm, but Elena kicked over a container, knocking him off balance. The gun skidded across the floor, landing near the open SUV door. Outside, sirens began to wail, faint at first, then growing louder. Colton broke free and bolted for the exit. "You'll regret this," he shouted. Elena called after him. "No, Colton. You already did." The armed man turned to flee, but red and blue lights flared through the fog as police cars surrounded the dock. Officers poured in, shouting orders. Within seconds, the men were on the ground, their weapons kicked away. Graham leaned against a crate, breathing hard. "You planned that?" Elena gave a tired smile. "Just improvised." He laughed softly. "You're impossible. And you're late," she said, pointing at the flashing lights. "They almost beat us here." He looked at her for a long moment. "Elena, thank you," she shrugged. "You'd do the same. Maybe once," he said quietly, "but I forgot how." The sirens faded as officers led the men away. The storm had broken. A pale dawn began to rise over the river. Graham turned toward her, rain running down his face. "So what now?" She looked out at the horizon, where light began to push through the fog. "Now you rebuild, and I go back to cleaning up what's left." He smiled faintly. "You know, I could use someone like you." "Permanently," Elena chuckled. "Careful, Mr. Westbrook. You might just start sounding human." They both laughed quietly, exhausted, but real. And as the first sunlight touched the wet concrete, the trap at Pier 19 finally closed for good. A week later, Portland woke under soft light and the faint scent of spring rain. The newspapers carried the story everywhere. "Corporate sabotage foiled. At Westbrook Industries, CEO cooperates in FBI sting." But inside the company, life moved quietly. The chaos had faded, leaving behind the hum of computers, the rhythm of coffee breaks, and the slow process of starting over. Graham Westbrook stood by the window of his office, watching the city stretch beneath him. The fatigue still showed in his face, but something else had replaced the bitterness clarity. On his desk sat a sealed box labeled Project Genesis. Inside were fragments of Valerie's corrupted files, the last trace of everything they'd survived. He hadn't opened it since Pier 19. A soft knock at the door. "Come in," he said. Elena stepped in, wearing her gray work jacket, her hair tied back neatly. She smiled faintly. "You called for me?" He nodded. "I wanted to thank you properly this time. You didn't just save my company. You reminded me what it was supposed to stand for." She shrugged lightly. "It wasn't about saving a company. It was about doing what's right." Graham smiled. "Then maybe we should start doing more of that around here." She looked around the office cleaner now, brighter. "You even took my advice about fresh flowers," she teased, nodding toward a small vase by the window. "Don't get used to it," he said, laughing quietly. "It's maintenance, not decoration." There was a pause, soft and full of unspoken things. Elena broke the silence first. "I'm taking a few days off. Caleb's got a school recital. He's nervous, but excited." "He'll do great," Graham said. "He's got his aunt's courage." Her eyes warmed. "And maybe your stubbornness." He chuckled, then turned serious. "Elena, If you ever want a permanent role, something beyond cleaning shifts, the doors open. I'll make it official." She smiled gently. "Thank you, but I think I'm right where I need to be. Some people clean floors, some clean hearts. I guess I do a little of both." He looked at her, really looked, seeing not just the woman who had saved him, but the person who had forced him to face himself. "You know," he said, "I spent years building walls so no one could see what was behind them. Turns out it just takes one person with a mop and too much courage to knock them down." Elena laughed softly. "Then maybe stop building them." He nodded, his voice lower now. "I'll try." She picked up her jacket from the chair. "You'll be fine, Graham. You just needed a second chance." He hesitated. "And what about you?" She smiled, calm, genuine. "I already took mine." They walked together toward the elevator. Down in the lobby, sunlight poured through the glass doors. Darla from the diner waved from across the street, holding 2 cups of coffee. Elena grinned. "Looks like your caffeine supply is secure." "Good," he said. "I'm going to need it." She turned to go, but he called out softly, "Elena?" She looked back. He gestured toward the sunlight. "You were right. Messes don't clean themselves." Her eyes softened. "Glad you finally believe that." As she stepped into the light, the elevator doors closed behind him, carrying him upward to a new beginning. The city buzzed faintly below, alive, imperfect, beautiful. Graham paused once more by his window. In the reflection of the glass, he saw not the man who had nearly lost everything, but the man who had learned how to begin again. And somewhere outside, a janitor with a second-hand laptop and a quiet smile walked toward the diner, humming a tune that sounded like hope. Sometimes the quietest stories leave the deepest marks. Graham Westbrook had built walls of glass and numbers, while Elena Morales lived in the humble rhythm of mops, coffee, and courage. 2 lives that should never have crossed, found each other in the stillness after a storm, and somehow both learned how to breathe again. In the end, it wasn't power or money that restored his world, but the simple kindness of a woman who refused to look away from a broken soul. When he looked out at the sunrise above Portland, he no longer saw a skyline of profits and losses, but the shimmer of second chances, the kind you don't buy, but earn through humility, forgiveness, and grace. And somewhere in that golden light, the hum of a city waking up, a janitor walking toward her morning shift, there was a quiet truth that every listener could feel in their bones. It's never too late to begin again. Lesson: love and redemption are not found in grand gestures, but in everyday acts of goodness, the coffee shared with a friend, the forgiveness offered after years of silence, the courage to show up for someone else's tomorrow. Kindness, no matter how small, has the power to rebuild what pride once destroyed. Like the warm light of a porch lamp glowing through a long winter night, one gentle heart can guide another home. Maybe you've known that feeling too. The comfort of a Sunday meal with family, the laughter of children echoing in an old kitchen, the memory of someone who believed in you when you didn't believe in yourself. These are the quiet miracles that remind us that happiness doesn't fade with age. It deepens with gratitude. So tonight, take a moment to think about your own second chances. And if this story touched your heart, type 1 in the comments. If you think we can tell it better, press 0 and share your thoughts, because stories like these grow stronger when we reflect on them together. And remember, even after the hardest rain, the porch light of hope still waits for you to come home.